For 5 Christmases, they forgot her. This year, she remembered herself. Eleanor Parker, the forgotten mother, once waited for an invitation that never came, until silence became her weapon and loneliness turned into her strength. A house on the mountain, a rewritten will, and a Christmas that would change her family forever. Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below. My name is Ellie. I'm 62 years old, and what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. This is the 5th Christmas in a row my family has forgotten me. That sentence kept echoing in my head, like an old tune that refuses to fade. I stood in the wide, echoing kitchen, setting the table for one, a single piece of perfectly seared salmon sprinkled with fine sea salt, a few drops of lemon, and a sprig of dill I'd picked from the little pot by the window. The scent of butter melting in the pan mingled with licorice and drifted through the air, warm and comforting. I ladled the sauce, plated everything carefully, as if someone else might be about to sit down with me. But then I laughed at myself. At 62, I had long grown used to the silence of this house. It was too big, too full of memories, and too rich with echoes. These walls once heard David humming in the kitchen, the kids bickering over cookies. Now, only the quiet breath of the heater remained, murmuring like a tired heart. On the table sat a single set of silverware. One glass of white wine I'd poured just to make the meal look complete. "Have yourself a merry little Christmas," played softly from the old speaker on the shelf, the singer's velvet voice wrapping around the emptiness. I chewed slowly, deliberately avoiding the ceiling, where a few silver tinsel strands from last year still clung. Maybe I'd kept them because I had no reason to take them down, as if, by leaving them there, someone might remember that this year I was still waiting. Then the phone buzzed. The screen lit up. Ethan, FaceTime. My heart skipped. My grandson, 8 years old, rosy cheeks, loose front tooth. Just seeing his name softened me, as if a little sunlight had broken through winter. I swiped the screen, and his bright face filled the kitchen, glowing so much it seemed to light the room. "Hi, Grandma." Ethan beamed, his wind-whistling lisp making the words irresistibly sweet. "Hello, my little sunshine," I said, trying to hide my delight. "That tooth's still hanging on, huh?" "It's about to fall out. The dentist says by Christmas, the tooth fairy will have to work overtime." He laughed, eyes sparkling. I laughed too, until my gaze drifted past him. Behind Ethan, the Christmas tree stretched almost to the ceiling, lights twinkling, piles of red-wrapped gifts scattered underneath. From somewhere farther off came Jingle Bell Rock, the crinkle of tape, and a voice saying, "Put that box by the fireplace. It'll look better there." That room looked so familiar. The living room David and I had painted ourselves, warm gray walls chosen to frame the family portrait. "Are you decorating?" I asked softly. Ethan blinked, lips twitching. Yeah, but I'm not supposed to talk about the surprise." "What surprise, sweetheart?" He glanced to the side, whispering like it was top secret. "For Christmas this year, Dad says we're keeping it small. Just immediate family." I tilted my head. "Just family? Meaning?" Before Ethan could answer, Michael's voice called from off-screen. "Ethan, who are you talking to?" "Grandma," Ethan replied, but the image had already jolted. In a heartbeat, my son's face appeared. The same face I used to kiss every morning before school, now calm to the point of distance. "Hi, Mom," he said with a polite, uneasy smile. "Hello, dear. Your son and I were talking about Christmas plans." Michael exhaled softly. "Oh, it's nothing big, Mom. We're keeping it small this year. You know, things have been hectic. Everyone's busy. You should just stay home and rest, okay? We'll FaceTime on Christmas Eve." The words slid into me like a thin blade. "Just you all?" I asked, my voice steady but fragile. "Yeah, me, Sam, Daniel, the kids. You understand. Fewer people? More intimate?" I smiled, though the sound caught in my throat. "Intimate," I repeated, tasting the word. "You get it," Michael said with quiet finality, then ended the call before I could respond. The screen went black. My face reflected faintly. Silver hair glinting under the kitchen light, eyes swollen as if they'd cried in another lifetime. I set the phone down. My knuckles whitened. A chill ran down my spine. The house was silent again. Outside, wind hissed softly through the cypress trees. I could hear every tick of the clock, every sigh from the heater. In my head, keeping it small, repeated over and over, steady, merciless. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't busyness. It wasn't so you can rest. They had talked, decided, and crossed my name off the list, an omission with intent. I stood, quietly clearing the plate. The salmon had gone cold. I packed it away, rinsed my hands under the tap. The cold water sharpened my senses. I looked around the kitchen. The empty chair across the table, the old clock David once repaired, the small wedding photo on the shelf. Everything looked back at me in silence. Upstairs, the wooden steps groaned beneath each footfall. My bedroom was neat, the kind of order that only comes from years of solitude. I opened the closet. On the top shelf, behind a box of quilts, sat a blue paper bag tied with a red ribbon. I pulled it down. A fine layer of dust clung to my fingers. I opened it. The faint scent of new paper, wool, and a trace of Christmas candle from my favorite shop. Inside were 4 carefully wrapped gifts: a Lego spaceship set for Ethan, a wine-colored scarf for Samantha, a photo book for Daniel, and a vintage watch for Michael, the one David once dreamed of buying but gave up for tuition fees. On each box, my slanted handwriting read, "To Ethan, to Sam, to Daniel, to Michael." I hadn't written "from Grandma" yet. I was saving that for Christmas Eve, when we'd all be together, and I'd sign them with a smile. I brushed the red ribbon lightly, lips moving without sound. They didn't invite me. The sentence echoed. Clean, cold, bare. But beneath it, something else stirred. Not anger, but a quiet sadness, thick as fog, and the realization that I had never really stopped hoping. I thought of David. He once said, on a night just like this, "Ellie, you never need anyone's permission to be happy." I closed my eyes. His image was fading, but his voice remained. A last flicker of light in a dark room. I put the gift bag back, closed the closet, and sat on the bed. The ticking clock downstairs pulsed through the floorboards, steady as a countdown to the moment I finally understood. I had reached the end of waiting. I rose and went downstairs. My footsteps echoed. The kitchen still glowed under the warm light. I picked up my phone, opened Facebook, scrolled through their photos. Samantha at a Christmas fair, Daniel with a close-up of a mince pie, Michael's post. Keeping it small this year. Caption, "Just us." I paused for a long while, then quietly turned off the screen. I didn't cry. There was no reason left for tears. What I felt instead was a hollow space, But inside that hollow, something was shifting. A thought, small and still, but clear. Enough. Moonlight streamed through the window, splitting the kitchen in half. One side bright, one side shadowed. I stood in that silver line, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost. Softly, firmly, I said aloud, "They may forget to invite me, but tomorrow I'll invite myself into another life." And that night, I believed it was true. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The room was bathed in that winter shade of bluish gray, the kind of light that makes it impossible to tell where night ends and dawn begins. Wind pressed against the window pane, whispering softly, as though someone were murmuring just outside. I made coffee, an old habit for two people, now only one. The aroma filled the air, but the taste had long faded. I sat by the table, listening to the drip of the machine, drop by drop, like time itself, falling into the porcelain cup printed with seashells, the one David once gave me. I remembered how he once said, "Do you notice, Ellie? We always choose things that are small, but lasting, just like love." Back then I smiled, never realizing that one day those small things would be the only ones left. I picked up my phone. A new notification gleamed. Michael posted a new photo. Christmas prep with the family. A short caption, a tree emoji, a heart. They were all smiling, surrounded by gifts, lights, laughter. I stared at the picture until it blurred. Maybe because of tears. Or maybe because my eyes had grown tired after years of looking at things not meant for me. I rose from my chair and walked to the cabinet where I kept all the important things: papers, photographs, and what was left of David. The walnut box sat in the bottom corner. I opened it. Inside was a stack of investment documents David had jokingly called my happiness fund. I brushed my fingers over his handwritten note. For Ellie. For her happiness. Spend it on something that makes her smile. I had never used it, perhaps because I didn't think I deserved to spend anything after he was gone. Or maybe because I was afraid that if I did, the fund would run dry, just like his love. I leafed through the statements, the cold numbers somehow still carrying his warmth, and I heard his voice again, deep and gentle. You have to live, Ellie, not just exist. And for the first time in years, I wondered, was I living or merely waiting for someone to remember me? I turned on my computer. The screen lit up, reflecting a face. The face of someone who used to be a wife, a mother, a home. Now reduced to a name in a contact list that her children scrolled past when they needed a video call. I opened a new tab. Real estate, Washington State, mountain homes for sale. I didn't know why I typed that. Maybe because last night I'd said, tomorrow I'll start again somewhere new. And the words were still echoing inside me. I browsed through pictures, houses tucked among pine forests, steep roofs dusted with snow, wide windows overlooking valleys. Then one appeared, timber ridge, stone walls, glass roof, nestled against a mountainside, light spilling through the windows like melted honey. I clicked on it, reading the description. Secluded, peaceful, for those seeking a new beginning. I leaned back in the chair. My heartbeat was slow, but steady. Maybe this was the first time I'd thought about doing something just for myself. Not to prove anything, not to be praised, not to be approved. I smiled faintly and whispered, David, you'd probably call me crazy. And in my memory, his voice answered, if crazy means happy, then be crazy. The coffee had gone cold. I stood up and opened the window. The wind rushed in, so cold it stung my cheeks. I inhaled deeply. The crisp air made my heart tremble, the same way it did when I was young. That afternoon, I went to the bank. The young teller recognized my name and smiled. "Miss Ellie, it's been a while." "Yes," I said. "I'd like to make a transfer." "To where?" I looked at the screen, my lips curling slightly. "To myself." In the evening, I sat in the living room, looking around the house. The walls David and I once wallpapered, the armchair where he used to read, the wedding photo coated with a thin layer of dust. Everything bore traces of a past life, like fine ash settling over the years. And I realized, no matter how beautiful a place is, it cannot be home if love no longer lives there. I opened a drawer and took out an old notebook, the one David had given me on my 50th birthday. For new dreams, I'd never written in it. The first page was still blank, except for a line in his fountain pen handwriting. "Don't let the world make you small." My hand trembled as I began to write, but the letters came out clear. December 17th. I have been forgotten for the 5th time, but this time, I will not wait. I will choose myself. That night, I poured a small glass of wine and sat by the window. Outside, snow began to fall, the first flakes, quiet and gentle, covering the fence, the porch, the old car David used to drive. The streetlight glowed through it all, making the world look as though it were being forgiven. I thought back to each empty Christmas. The first year, they said, "Mom needs rest." I believed them. The second, "We're busy, please understand." I smiled. The third, just a rushed phone call. The fourth, a text, "Love you, Mom." And this year, no invitation, no mention, just a long echoing silence between me and the ones I gave life to. I raised my glass, touching the air as if toasting someone unseen. "For happiness, David," I said softly, "for a new beginning." A faint light flickered inside me, not joy, not exactly hope. It was resolve, a warmth edged in steel. I turned back to the desk, reopened the real estate site. The cursor blinked over the box that read, "Contact Agent." I typed my name, phone number, then paused at the line marked, "Message." "I'm interested in the property at Timber Ridge. I'd like to see it in person." I read the sentence again and again. Each word was a heartbeat. Then I clicked, "Send." At that exact moment, I could breathe. A long, deep, complete breath, as if I'd flung open a window that had been sealed shut for years. I smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since David died. That night, I placed the unopened gifts back in the closet. This time, not to hide them for waiting, but to keep them as proof that I had once loved, and that now I was learning to love again, starting with myself. I added one more line to my journal. It's time to stop waiting for invitations that will never come. And when I closed the notebook, the wind outside had quieted. There was only me, and the strange, gentle weightlessness of someone who has just remembered she can begin again. That morning, when I left the house, the winter wind swept across the porch, making the wooden sign creak. I slipped on the wool sweater David once bought me, locked the door, and didn't look back. The silver sedan, his old one, sputtered to life after a few hesitant starts. Moon River began to play, the soft voice steadying my trembling hands on the steering wheel. "Drive slow, Ellie," as if he were still sitting beside me. "I know," I whispered. The road leading into the Cascades wound through rows of ancient pines. The scent of sap and snow burned faintly in my lungs. a sting that reminded me I was still alive. A wooden sign appeared by the roadside. Welcome to Timber Ridge District. The paint was peeling, as if it had weathered too many winters. I turned off the engine for a moment, listening to the firm silence of the mountains, a silence that breathed on its own. The house came into view after a bend. Gray stone walls, a slanted glass roof reflecting a leaden sky. A thin layer of snow blanketed the steps. I opened the car door. The cold air rushed in, the first touch of a new beginning. A blonde woman with her hair neatly tied stood waiting by the gate. Mrs. Parker? I'm Diane. This house is the gem of Timber Ridge. Beautiful natural light. Perfect for a quiet retirement. She emphasized the last two words with a polite smile. I only need peace, I said. You'll have complete peace here. No nearby neighbors. Some people find it a bit lonely. I'm used to that, I replied. The front door opened, breathing out the scent of new timber and old smoke. Inside, the place glowed. High ceilings, walnut floors, a black stone fireplace at the center like a sleeping heart. Winter light poured through the large glass panels, filling the air with a fine mist of dust. Particles of memory without names. Diane spoke crisply about the granite kitchen, the heating system, the study. Her voice flowed past me like a distant stream. All I heard were the creaks of wood, the whisper of wind through cracks, and the sound of my own footsteps. This house was listening to me. I stopped before the glass wall overlooking the valley. The pine forest stretched dark and green to the horizon, and beyond it, a frozen lake shimmered silver. I pictured myself making coffee by this window in the morning, lighting the fire at night, living to a rhythm that belonged only to me. No more keeping it small, no more you should rest, Mom. The question why simply vanished. All that remained was now. Would you like to see the basement? Diane asked. No need. I've seen enough. But you haven't seen the whole house, and the price isn't exactly small. Most clients like to think it over. I'll buy it, I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me. No bargaining. I'll pay in cash. Her professional smile wavered. If you're certain, I can finalize everything in 5 days. 3, I said. I want to move in soon. She nodded, hiding her surprise behind the contract papers. I signed the deposit right there on the kitchen counter. The pen's tip pressed into the paper with a soft click, like the sound of a door closing behind me. Behind it, the forgotten Christmases. Ahead, another kind of winter. When Diane drove away, the house immediately fell silent again. I stood in the middle of the room, a hand over my heart, checking its rhythm. No panic, no pleading. Just the steady beat of a decision made. I lit the fireplace. The fire cracked and popped. The scent of burning pine filled the room. Flames danced against the stone walls, flickering across the glass like old memories being gently warmed. I held my hands to the fire. The wrinkled skin flushed pink. There's still warm blood in me, I thought, and smiled. I opened the window to let the cold in. The air bit at my cheeks, and I drew a long breath, my lungs stretching open. Outside, the stillness was so deep, I could hear the snow falling. Loneliness here wasn't like in the old house. It wasn't hollow. It was space, the space freedom needs to grow. I called Marcus, David's lawyer and friend. Ellie, it's been so long. I need to rewrite my will, I said, eyes fixed on the fire. He paused. Is something wrong? No, it's just time to put everything where I want it. If one day I'm gone, my things will go to those who understand boundaries. Marcus exhaled, softly, an unspoken nod. I'll come to Timber Ridge this weekend, and I'll bring cookies. Good, I said, smiling. There's not a single bakery here. I hung up and walked slowly around the house. The bedroom faced east to catch the sunrise. A small study looked out over the hill. The kitchen was wide enough for one person to cook without feeling empty. I opened a closet, breathing in the scent of new wood. The door closed with a low, warm thud, like a quiet promise. The sky was dimming. It turned to a deep bronze, thin as glaze. I brewed tea and sat by the glass wall. The frozen lake in the valley mirrored the sunset, while a few crows cut black lines across the gray. I thought of David, his hand on my back whenever I hesitated. You don't need permission to be happy. Here, that sentence felt written into the air itself. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed, Timber Ridge. I chose myself. Home is where the heart is respected. I paused, listening to the wind slip under the roof. Amid the countless murmurs of the mountains, I recognized my own voice. Steady, low, sure. For years, I had only heard it when speaking to others. Today, for the first time, I spoke it to myself. I tore a page from an old notebook and wrote a short list. Change locks, install security system, check chimney, buy wool blankets, hire gardener to clear the path, order satellite internet. Each line was a stake driven into the ground, anchoring me in the present. Night came fast and deep. I turned off the lights, letting the fire own the room. From the armchair, I could see through the glass. Snow falling thicker, pines bowing under its weight, and my house standing tall, like a vow. I whispered, no one here to judge, no one to ask permission from, just me, and the right to live as I choose. A drop of hot water slid from the corner of my eye. I wasn't sure if it was from the wind or from touching a part of myself I thought long lost. I wiped it quickly and chuckled. I texted Marcus, bring a bottle of red wine. We'll toast to beginnings that don't need anyone's approval. Then I turned off my phone and leaned back in the chair. The wood in the fire cracked softly as if in agreement. Outside, snow kept falling, each flake weightless, yet together, they could change the color of the whole mountain. I thought, maybe happiness arrives like that too. Small decisions gathered into a new life. I closed my eyes, breathing out fully. Welcome home, Ellie, I said to my reflection in the glass. This time, no one answered for me, and no one needed to. In the silence colored by firelight, I heard something simple and certain. I was home. 3 days later, when the last moving truck pulled away, I stood in the middle of the living room, my sweater damp with sweat, though it was below zero outside. Timber Ridge was truly my home now. No longer a dream on a screen, no longer a someday plan. It was the present, with the breath of snow, the whisper of wind and cardboard boxes scattered around my feet. I lit the fireplace. The fire caught quickly. The scent of burning pine spread through the air, merging with the crisp newness of the house. Every breath I took felt heavier, fuller, as if my lungs were relearning how to breathe after years of shallow survival. The door opened. Marcus stepped in, his brown coat dusted with snow. Good heavens, Ellie, he said, smiling. This place is stunning. You chose well. I hugged him lightly, the kind of embrace shared by two people who've attended too many funerals, too many silent Christmases. You brought the cookies? Cookies and wine. Marcus lifted a paper bag. But what I really brought are the papers. You sure you want to do this? I nodded, pouring us each a glass of wine. "I've waited long enough for others to decide my life for me," I said. "It's time I write it myself." We sat at the wooden table, papers spread wide. The pen scratched briskly across the pages. I changed almost everything. The assets were no longer divided evenly among the children. Most went to charity, the rest to myself. Marcus looked up, a mix of surprise and admiration in his eyes. "You've thought this through. They won't be pleased." "I'm not doing it to please them," I replied. "I'm doing it to find peace." Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire danced. I signed my name, the lines trembling but firm. It felt like writing a farewell to the woman I used to be, the one who had always asked permission just to exist. That afternoon, Marcus left early before the snow thickened. I stood by the door, watching his car disappear into the gray mist. When the door closed, the house fell into complete silence. I began to organize the place, starting with the locks. I called a local security company, asking for a full sensor system. A young technician arrived, tall, broad-shouldered, salt and pepper hair, and kind, guarded eyes. His name was James Cooper. "I won't let anyone in unless you want them to," he said, after installing the control panel. "It's remote out here, but beautiful. A place like this needs a keeper." I smiled faintly. "I'm not doing this because I'm afraid. I just think I deserve to be protected." He nodded. "That's the best reason I've ever heard." We shared a cup of coffee in the kitchen. His hands were large, calloused, the kind of hands that once held a gun, not a wrench. "You used to be a cop?" I asked. James smiled slightly, eyes drifting to the snowy window. "Yeah, 15 years in Seattle. Then something happened. Made me want to leave it all. Now I fix houses, install alarms, tend a small garden. Around here, no one asks about the past." I looked at him for a long moment. I understand that feeling. By the time he finished, snow had covered the yard. I walked him to the gate, listening to his boots sink into the soft white. He turned back and said, "If you need anything, I'm at the cabin at the end of the slope. Only 2 houses with lights on this season, yours and mine." "Good," I said. "Fewer people, less noise." When the door closed behind me, a gust of wind made the house tremble slightly. I stood still, a strange feeling spreading in my chest. Not quite loneliness, not quite safety, but something calm and watchful. Night came. I sat by the fire, watching the flames throw shadows on the walls. The wind outside sounded like a distant sea. I opened my notebook and wrote the first entry in my new home. Day 1 at Timber Ridge. I'm no longer waiting for anyone. I'm waiting for myself. Then came a list of tasks. Repaint the fence, plant lavender, clean the shed. Small things, yet to me, they were acts of care. When you've spent a lifetime tending to others, learning to care for yourself is something you must relearn from the beginning. I stepped outside into the snowy yard. Everything was white, cold enough to sting the skin, but the chill felt strangely gentle. Hands in my pockets, I gazed at the world before me. Timber Ridge bathed in violet dusk, veiled in fog, utterly still. Each breath rose in small clouds and vanished into the sky. Quietly, I said, as if to David, "I'm doing it, aren't I?" And somewhere in the wind, it was as if his voice answered, "Yes, you finally chose yourself." I smiled, the rare kind of smile untouched by bitterness. That night, I lay in a new bed, listening to snow tapping on the glass roof. Each soft thump made my heart flutter. Not from fear, but from realization. For the first time in years, I was sleeping in a home that bore no one's shadow but mine. The next morning, I made coffee and opened the window. Light streamed in, glinting through the mist. I stood there, breathing deeply until my throat burned. The pines shimmered under the snow. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. All documents finalized. Enjoy your freedom. I replied, for the first time, I know what freedom really means. Then I turned off the sound, left the phone on the table, and spent the whole morning wiping the glass panes, hanging curtains, setting David's old books on the shelves. The house began to breathe with its own rhythm. Each step I took on the wooden floor sounded like the beat of a new song. In the afternoon, James stopped by with a bundle of firewood. He stood on the porch, his face flushed red from the cold. Thought you might need more. Nights in Timber Ridge are longer than you'd think. I'm used to long nights, I said, opening the door. We stacked the logs by the hearth and chatted idly. I asked him about the frozen lake in the valley. He told me he'd once rescued someone who'd fallen through it. I still hear the ice cracking when I sleep, he said. But that sound reminds me I'm still alive. I looked into his eyes and saw a reflection of myself. Someone who had known loss, yet still had the courage to believe in peace. When he left, the sunset burned red across the mountains. I stood on the steps, watching him go, my heart light as the wind. I closed the door, locked it, and whispered, I only hope my children never find out where I've moved. And in the soft hush of falling snow, the words didn't sound like fear, but like a prayer for my own freedom. I had been at Timber Ridge for 2 weeks. The snow covered every path, so thick that each morning I had to clear the steps one by one before the door would open. But I didn't complain. The cold here wasn't like the loneliness of the city. It was pure, rhythmic, alive, as if nature were testing whether I truly meant to begin again. My days passed simply, brewing coffee, listening to music, reading a few pages, calling Marcus to discuss the transfers. I hadn't reached out to the kids. No messages, no calls. I knew I'd done the right thing, though deep down, there was still a thread that tugged sometimes. Faint, but real. One morning, thin sunlight spilled through the window pane, and my phone rang. It was Michael. The name lit up the screen like a scar being touched again just after it had healed. My heart beat slow, but hard. I hesitated a few seconds before answering. Hi, Mom, he said, his voice soft, too soft, like a polished mask. I heard you've moved? Yes, I said. I needed a change of air. Nice. I was just passing by the old house, saw it was locked. Neighbors said you sold it. I did. Oh, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Where's the new place? I could drop by, check your heating system. It's dangerous this time of year. The way he said check made my skin prickle. Michael's tone had always been the same, warm enough to disguise the fact that he was probing. I'm fine, I said. The heating's fine too. I just want to help. You should focus on your wife and kids, I said evenly. Everything's good here. Silence. Then that familiar half laugh. All right. It's just, Dad always told me to look after you. Your father's gone, I said sharply. And I don't need looking after. I hung up. My hand trembled slightly. Outside, the snow was falling harder. I didn't know why I felt cold in a house warmed by fire. That afternoon, while I was making tea, the security system beeped, a low, short tone. The monitor flickered to life, showing the camera feed from the front gate. At first, I thought it was a stray deer But then I saw a tall figure, dark coat, standing in the middle of the drive. The man looked up, straight into the camera. Even through the blur of snow, I recognized the posture, the knit hat. Michael. I couldn't breathe. He didn't knock. He simply took out his phone, snapped a few photos of the house, and left. No rush, no sneakiness, only a calm, deliberate air, like he was there to mark territory. I called Marcus immediately. Ellie? Michael was here, I said, voice hoarse. He found me. Silence on the other end for several seconds. You're sure? The camera recorded it. Listen to me, Marcus said, his tone firm. If he's found you, he'll come back. And he won't come alone. I sank into a chair, watching the flames flicker gold against the wall. I'd never felt both so strong and so fragile at once. Part of me wanted to believe my son was just curious. Another part knew Michael never did anything just out of curiosity. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind tapping against the windows sounded like fingers knocking. I got up, made another cup of tea, and stared at the camera feed. No one outside, only snow, endless white. But the feeling of being watched stayed, heavy as breath on the back of my neck. The next morning, when James came by to inspect the system, I told him. He listened quietly, not with polite concern, but with steady eyes that met mine. If you'd like, he said, I can add motion sensors around the woods out back. People here don't like uninvited guests. Neither do I replied. He worked silently. When he finished, he stood by the door, wiping his hands on an old towel. I don't know what's happening, he said, but I know the look of someone who's been hurt before. If someone's trying to scare you, don't let them know it's working. I nodded. I won't shake anymore. That afternoon, a text came from Michael's number. Looks like a lovely place, Mom. Timber Ridge, right? Did Dad help with the down payment? I read it over and over. No emojis, no affection, just a blade wrapped in courtesy. I deleted it, but my hand still trembled. I opened the drawer and took out the leather journal where I'd recorded everything since arriving at Timber Ridge. I wrote a single line. When they find me, they'll think they're in control, but I'm no longer the woman they forgot. That evening, Marcus called back. You holding up, Ellie? I'm fine, just tired. Don't be. They might test boundaries, but now you have the law. You have me. You have James. Timber Ridge isn't easy to trespass. I was quiet for a while, then asked, Marcus, do you ever think people can use family as a way to control others? He sighed. Family, Ellie, is a double-edged blade. If you hold it wrong, it cuts the one holding it. I smiled faintly. I've been cut enough. After the call, I turned off all the lights, leaving only the fire. In the dark, my house felt like a sleeping animal, calm, but ready to defend itself. I sat by the window, watching snow fall across the porch. I thought back to that first Christmas after David died. Everyone gathered, yet no one spoke of him. I'd stayed silent when Michael interrupted Samantha, when the kids laughed, when my absence became something expected. I thought silence kept peace. But that silence had been the rope tightening around my throat all those years. Now, in this house, I was done being silent. I replayed the footage from the camera. Each frame was proof. Michael standing there, staring straight into the lens, his eyes not those of a son missing his mother, but of a man assessing property. I paused at the 8th second, his face half hidden, under the hat, mouth curved in a cold smile. I saved the clip and sent it to Marcus with a message. You were right. He'll be back. And this time, I'll be ready. I set the phone down and exhaled. Outside, a sheet of snow slid from the roof and hit the ground with a sound like a memory shattering. I didn't know what would come next. But one thing was certain. If they thought I was still the frail, forgotten woman, they were wrong. The wind howled through the pines, carrying echoes that sounded almost like whispers. They're coming. I watched the fire in the hearth, and for the first time, I realized it wasn't just warmth. It was a warning. That night, the wind changed direction. The pines no longer whispered lullabies. They murmured like messengers. I washed the dishes, wiped the kitchen counter until the wood gleamed under the firelight. The clock ticked in, dry, deliberate beats. My fingers brushed the security panel, a new habit, like checking the pulse of the house itself. Near 10 o'clock, the alert chimed softly. A shiver ran up my spine before my eyes even reached the screen. The gate camera showed two figures in dark coats and wool hats, walking along the snowpath with the ease of people who'd done it before. I zoomed in, a strand of brown hair escaping from under a hat. Samantha. The shorter one ahead, moving briskly, Daniel. They didn't ring the bell. Samantha pulled out an old key ring, tried twice, failed. Daniel knelt, slid a thin card through the door crack. Click. The front door opened, soundless and terrifyingly smooth. My hand gripped the counter edge until my knuckles went white. The taste of metal rose to my tongue. The living room camera caught them in the firelight. Samantha's fingers gliding over the counters, the railing, the glass. Appraising. Daniel circled the fireplace, muttering, "Natural stone. If she resells—" "Shut up," Samantha snapped, though her eyes gleamed as if she'd just seen a price tag. She looked toward the valley, voice cold yet syrupy. Michael was right. Mom couldn't have bought this on her own. Then she whispered the words I heard as clearly as if she were beside me. "We'll surprise her for Christmas. She'll love it." That sentence broke something small and deep inside me, a bone of belief. They called trespass a surprise. I hit call. Marcus's face appeared on screen, framed in yellow lamplight. Reading glasses pushed to his forehead. He began to speak, then froze. "Dear God, I'm not imagining things," I said. "They're in my house." "I'm calling James," Marcus said, already standing. "Don't confront them, Ellie. Let the cameras record." James joined through speakerphone, his voice dark and solid as old oak. "They picked the lock?" "A card. They didn't break the door, just the boundary." "I'm on my way. Do not open the door. Do not speak to them." On screen, Samantha and Daniel moved silently, opening cabinets, sliding drawers, jotting notes on their phones. I zoomed in and caught fragments of talk. "Did Dad leave her this much?" "We need to talk to Marcus." "Deed." My friend's name, dragged into their arithmetic. "Ellie," Marcus said slowly. "Breathe in, breathe out. This is evidence." I wanted to reach for his hand, like I had at David's funeral, but there was only air. So I clutched the table edge instead. When the blood drained from my fingers, nausea ebbed, replaced by something cleaner, colder, a kind of clarity where excuses couldn't live. They left the way they came. The door clicked shut. The alarm gave a soft tone. I waited one heartbeat before letting myself exhale. 3 sharp knocks. I unlocked the door from the panel. James stepped in, snow speckling his black coat like salt. Without pleasantries, he leaned over the screen, replayed the footage in slow motion. The 3 of us, Marcus on video, James in person, and me, stood shoulder to shoulder before the black glass, watching the accident that wasn't an accident. "I'll file a report immediately," James said. "Photograph the latch marks, extract footage, timestamp it. If they come back, I'll call the county sheriff." "Thank you," I said, my voice rough but steady. Marcus lowered his glasses, eyes flashing with professional focus. "Ellie, write a statement. Exact time, words, your feelings. Tomorrow, I'll send the legal notice." "Do it," I said. James checked the locks, added an extra bolt, then made tea with the precise movements of someone who spent too many nights awake on duty. He set the cup before me, one hand resting lightly on the back of the chair, not touching me, just placing his presence there. "You can shake for a few minutes," he said quietly. "Just don't shake for long." "I'm remembering how to stay still," I replied. When he left, the snow had covered half the path. "I'll patrol once tonight," he said. "Call me if anything moves." The door closed. A brief gust of wind slipped through. Then silence. I opened my brown leather journal. The pen hesitated before the ink flowed. 23:14. Samantha and Daniel entered using a card. No doorbell, no call for me. They called for value. They mentioned Marcus, deed, and a Christmas surprise, trimming boundaries and tying them up with ribbon. I paused, listened to the wood crack in the fireplace, a sound of agreement, and wrote on. Sensation. Cold down the spine, stomach tight, knuckles white. Beneath the cold is something else, not fear. Steel. Through the wide glass, the hill behind the house glowed faintly, soaked in snow like wet paper. I pressed my palm to the glass. Heat misted, then vanished. I thought of the Christmases I'd been forgotten, of keeping it small, of the lost ring of keys I'd left behind in that old house. All the details threading into a single line that led here. Stone walls, hard wind, and a woman who finally learned how to say enough. I texted Marcus. "Send the warning letter tomorrow. Subject, unlawful entry. Attach video. All communications about property and estate through legal counsel." He replied almost instantly. "Understood." I turned off every light, letting the fire command the room. The flames bit at the stone like small fish. I poured more hot water. The steam blurred the distance between me and my reflection in the glass. Then I spoke softly, to the fire itself. "They think they'll surprise me. Fine. I have surprises of my own." The night deepened. Wind swept along the house's flank with a low, oceanic moan. I listened. Beneath that, another rhythm. Low, steady, certain, the beat of a heart reclaiming its ground. I wanted no one's understanding, no one's apology. I wanted order. And order begins at the boundary. I set the panel to auto guard mode. Before going upstairs, I stood at the kitchen threshold, taking one last look. The armchair, the bookshelf, the fire, the glass wall. Everything still exactly where I'd placed it. Nothing taken. But something priceless returned. The meaning of home. I pulled up the blanket, listening to the soft thuds of snow slipping down the glass roof. Each sound sealed another layer of resolve. I closed my eyes and whispered the final line, meant for no one but myself. Tomorrow, the new rules begin. The next morning, the snow reached my ankles. Everything around me was buried in white silence, as if the world were holding its breath, waiting for me to act. I made coffee, the dark roast scent filling the kitchen. When the final drip hit the bottom of the cup, I knew I was ready. I opened my laptop and replayed the footage from the night before. There they were, Samantha and Daniel, each movement clear as daylight. I slowed the video, pausing at the moment Samantha said, "We'll surprise her for Christmas." The words no longer made my heart flinch, as they had last night. Now they were just lines in a file, evidence, not emotion. I no longer looked at my children through the eyes of a mother. I looked at them as someone preparing to strike back. Marcus called, his voice low but calm. The warning letter went out this morning. I made sure it reached Michael first. "Thank you," I said. "I need you here, Marcus. There's something I want to do. With you and James." By noon, both of them had arrived. Marcus wore his long coat, a folder tucked under his arm. James came with snow still on his knit cap, his face flushed from the cold. They stepped inside, bringing with them the faint warmth of human presence amid a frozen world. I poured coffee and sat across from them at the wooden table. "I'm not hiding," I began. "If they want a family performance, I'll let them have one. But on my stage." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning?" "I want to draw a legal boundary, in black and white, with witnesses, with law." James nodded slowly. "A boundary agreement?" "Yes. Call it by its name. And when they come, I'll make them sign." We spent the whole afternoon preparing. Marcus drafted the document. "I, Eleanor Parker, declare full ownership of the Timber Ridge property. Any act of trespass or unauthorized entry will be subject to prosecution." I read each line aloud, adjusted every word. The pencil tapped rhythmically on the table, the steady beat of a heart that had changed from trembling to resolute. James double-checked the security system. He replaced locks, added hidden cameras. "If they come back," he said, "I'll know 5 minutes before they arrive." By evening, the snow had stopped, leaving only the pale light of sunset across the woods. The three of us sat around the fireplace. The firelight flickered across Marcus's face, tired but satisfied, and across James's eyes, calm, deep, steady as stone. I looked at them and felt something close to family. A family chosen, not inherited. "Are you afraid?" I asked James. "No," he said. "I've lived through worse than snow, and worse than people who use blood ties as weapons." His answer made me smile. When they left, the house fell into a heavy, comforting stillness. Outside, melting snow dripped from the roof. Moonlight cut through the clouds, casting a silver gash across the floor. I stared at it for a long time, then opened my brown leather journal. December 22nd. They will come back. I can feel it. But this time, I won't be the one waiting at the door. I'll be the one holding the law. I paused, listening to the wind curl around the eaves, then wrote. I used to beg for a seat at their table. Now, I have a table of my own. When night fell, I built another fire. The orange glow shimmered against the glass, the snow outside reflecting it back. A strange, beautiful light, half peaceful, half warning. The next morning, James returned with wooden planks and a toolkit. "You should reinforce the back door," he said. I held the frame while he worked, the smell of freshly cut wood mixing with cold air. As he tightened a bolt, he asked, "Will you tell them before they get the letter?" "No," I said. "They'll read it in silence and understand that I'm no longer weak." "And if they don't understand?" "I'll remind them," I said, "in a way they can't ignore." He chuckled softly, a sound of respect and caution. "You're more dangerous than they think." "I used to be forgotten," I said. "Now, no one will ever forget me." That afternoon, I opened the window. The snow was melting into thin streams that trickled down the valley. The lake below began to thaw, its silver surface reflecting the gray sky. I took a sip of tea, ginger and cinnamon, and breathed in the steam. Part of me felt lighter. Another part was drawn tight as a bowstring. Marcus called again. "Ellie, I just got an update. Michael received the letter. His reply was short. We're coming." I set the cup down gently. "When?" "He didn't say, but my guess, before Christmas." I walked to the window and looked down the snow-covered road that led into the mountain. "Good," I said. "I hate people who don't keep schedules." That night, I didn't sleep. I prepared everything. Checked locks, wrote down numbers, cleared the table, set out extra chairs. Not for guests, but for confrontation. For a reckoning I'd spent my whole life avoiding. At 3 a.m., I sat before the fire and rehearsed the words I would say. My voice filled the empty room. Slow, steady, unshaking. For years, I begged for a seat at their table. This year, they'll stand at my door. I repeated it until it became part of my breathing. Each word honed like a blade in the dark, cold, sharp, but not without mercy. When dawn arrived, the first light spread through the forest. I poured coffee and checked the cameras. The monitor blinked. Motion detected. South Gate. James was on patrol, his silhouette faint against the snow. But behind him, at the Timber Ridge entrance, I saw something else. Several figures moving through the trees. 10 people, carrying luggage, wrapped packages, headlights slicing weakly through the fog. My hand touched the screen. My heartbeat didn't quicken. It only grew heavier. Marcus called at that exact moment, his voice unnervingly calm. "Ellie, they're here. 10 of them." I looked out of the window. The pines glowed pale gold in the morning light, snowflakes still drifting lazily. Inside, I felt nothing but stillness, not fear, not anger, just the clear understanding that the hour had come. I stood, straightened my sweater, and walked to the table. My hands rested on the boundary document Marcus had drafted. The paper was cool. The ink still smelled new. "Good," I whispered, my eyes fixed on the window where shapes were moving closer. It's time they learned one thing. At Timber Ridge, no one enters unless I open the door. Christmas morning. Snow blanketed all of Timber Ridge, thick and blinding, turning the mountain into a quiet cathedral of light. I woke early and stood by the window, watching the pines bathe in the gold wash of dawn. Everything looked so peaceful. One could almost believe tragedy had never crossed this place. But I knew better. The silence before a storm is the most dangerous kind. I dressed carefully. A gray wool dress, a narrow silk ribbon around the waist. I tied my hair back, brushed on a hint of pale red lipstick. I wanted them to see not an old, fragile mother, but a woman standing firmly on her own ground. Around 10 o'clock, the first SUV appeared at the gate. Then the second, the third. 10 people. Children, spouses, grandchildren, who once were my blood, my reason for enduring, now arriving with smiles polished smooth as masks for a party. The camera chimed, then the doorbell rang. 3 sharp bursts, impatient. I opened the door. The air smelled of snow, and Samantha's expensive perfume, heavy as metal. Michael stood at the front, long coat, half smile. "Hello, Mother," he said, a hint of mockery in his tone. "We wanted to surprise you." I smiled faintly. "Yes, I heard." Behind him, Samantha lifted a bag of gifts, her voice bright and sugary. "I brought your favorite pies, and a few things for the kids. We wanted to spend Christmas with you, like old times." Like old times? I repeated, then stepped aside, my tone soft but edged. I don't recall anyone ever walking into my house uninvited in the old times. The group froze, their smiles stiffening. Michael arched an eyebrow, his voice even. Mother, we're family. Family doesn't need an invitation. Perhaps, I said. But this family has new rules, and today I'm the one who makes them. James appeared behind me, wearing his dark coat, eyes watchful. Marcus stood nearby, a folder in hand, calm as a man who knew exactly what was coming. I turned back to them, to faces once familiar, now distant. Come in, I said. Let's talk. This time, without secrets. The living room glowed with firelight. They set their gifts on the table, the crackle of wrapping paper mingling with the scent of wax, and a quiet tension. I sat in the main chair. Marcus took a seat beside me. James stayed near the door. Michael looked around, his tone lightly mocking. You've redecorated nicely, Mother. Cameras, security, a guard of your own. Timber Ridge seems to have made you wealthier than we thought. I set my teacup down, eyes calm. It made me safer. I'm protecting the only thing I have left. Peace. Samantha leaned forward, her voice coated in honey. Mom, we didn't come to argue. We just want to make sure you're cared for. This place is so far, so cold, so isolated. I cut her off. If care was what you meant, you had 5 Christmases to show it. No one spoke. Only the pop and crackle of the fire filled the silence. Marcus opened his folder, set a stack of papers on the table. I'm Mrs. Parker's attorney, he said clearly. Before we continue, I need everyone to read this. Michael's tone sharpened. Is that really necessary? Very, Marcus replied. Because the last time you two were in this house, it was unlawful entry. The air thickened. Samantha swallowed hard. You recorded us? I didn't record, I said softly. The security system did its job. Marcus laid down another paper. Copies of the legal notice, his voice steady. If it happens again, I'll be forced to file a report with local authorities. However, Mrs. Parker prefers resolution over conflict. So all she asks is this, that you sign this boundary agreement. It's simple. No one enters Timber Ridge without her consent. Michael gave a short, bitter laugh. We're her children, and we have to sign permission to visit our mother? No, I said evenly. You're signing to learn respect, something you seem to have misplaced. Silence. James's hand brushed lightly against my shoulder, a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone. I rose and walked toward them slowly. For years, I said, I begged for a seat at your table. But today, I have a table of my own. And if you want to sit here, you'll learn what keeps this one standing. Boundaries. Michael's voice grew sharp. So you're turning this family into a battlefield? No, I replied, meeting his eyes. I'm restoring order. You may not like it, but you left me no other choice. I handed him the pen. Sign or leave. Samantha's voice shook. We didn't come here to be humiliated. No one's being humiliated, Marcus said calmly. We're just making things clear. I looked at each of them. Faces once beloved, now distorted reflections of the children I'd known. The little ones clung to their parents, wide-eyed, not understanding. For a moment, something in me softened. Beneath the anger, the old wound still ached. I took a deep breath. If you truly want to stay, we can still share lunch. But after that, sign and go. Don't make me lock the door. Michael said nothing. The firelight flickered across his face. The same eyes as David's, though colder, emptier. I saw, for an instant, the ghost of my husband there. and realized I could not let his memory be twisted any further. At last, Michael took the pen. He signed hard, the paper tearing slightly. "All right, Mother," he said, his voice cutting. "You win." "No one wins," I said quietly. "I just stopped losing." They left in the cold afternoon. Engines started. Tires crushed the snow, the sound fading into the distance. I stood by the window, watching the road carved into two black lines through the white. Marcus and James stood behind me, silent. After a long moment, I turned and smiled faintly. "Do you hear that?" I asked. "Silence. That's the sound of a boundary." Marcus gave a small smile, removing his glasses. "And maybe," he said, "the beginning of peace." Outside, snow began to fall again, slow, soft, as if the sky were rewriting every trace left behind. Inside, the fire still burned, its light gleaming on the signed paper, the first document in my life I hadn't had to beg for. I knew the storm wasn't over, but that night, for the first time in years, I would sleep without locking my heart, because this time, I'd finally locked the right door. The house was so still I could hear the wood expand beneath the floorboards as the temperature dropped. The fire burned steadily. Its light was no longer there to chase away the cold, but to illuminate a chapter that had just closed. They had signed. They had left. For the first time in years, I sat in my own home without feeling like a trespasser. Marcus slipped the files into his case. James stood at the porch, solid as an old timber post. I held the boundary agreement, my fingertips tracing the deep groove of ink. Michael Parker. The pen stroke cut through the paper's grain, as if even he couldn't quite believe he'd yielded. I felt no triumph. What filled me wasn't victory. It was peace. The doorbell rang softly once. James looked at me. I nodded. Michael stood on the porch, hair soaked with snow, eyes red. Beside him was Lily, clutching a small box, her cheeks pink from the cold. "If you'll let us," Michael said, "we'd like to say a few more things." We sat around the table. I poured tea. The steam rose between us, a thin curtain of warmth. Michael looked at the signed paper, his voice hoarse. "I signed. You got what you wanted. But when Dad died, I got scared. Scared of losing more. So I started controlling everything I could. Calendars, dinners, who gets invited. I called it responsibility. But you were right. It was control. I thought if you depended on us, then maybe Dad was still here somehow." I listened, not interrupting. "You could have said this earlier," I said. "For 5 years, I left space for the truth." "I know." He lowered his head. "I was afraid too long." The door creaked. Samantha stepped in. No perfume, flat shoes, hair tied low. Her face was bare, tired, but real. "I was afraid too," she said. "I didn't avoid you because I hated you. I avoided you because I couldn't face a grief I couldn't fix. That kitchen, where I saw Dad laugh for the last time, it haunted me. I thought if I stayed happy near you, I'd be betraying him. Ignoring you was easier." Her words dropped like a stone, cracking the frozen surface between us. I set my cup down, inhaled deeply. "Silence is also betrayal," I said, not angry. "But today, you spoke." Lily hugged her box, whispering, "Why didn't Mommy ever invite Grandma? My teacher says we have to invite grandparents." Samantha closed her eyes briefly. "Because I wasn't brave enough. I was scared to see what real sadness looks like." I looked at the 3 generations before me. A man who hadn't learned to let go, a woman who had learned to forget, and a child who didn't yet understand distance. I said to Lily, Thank you for asking. Then to my children, I'm not your enemy. I'm the mirror you haven't dared to face. Fear, loss, weakness. Michael pressed his lips together. What do you want us to do? Leave Timber Ridge tonight, I said evenly. Stay in town. Tomorrow morning, if you still want to talk, meet me at the cafe by the post office. No gifts, no surprises, just coffee and truth. Michael nodded automatically. Samantha followed, like someone setting down a heavy stone. I turned to Lily. What do you want? I want to stay with Grandma tonight, if that's okay. I looked at Samantha. She hesitated, then said softly, if Ellie agrees. I went to my room, opened the closet. David's wheat-colored sweater lay folded, still carrying the scent of pine and old rain. I placed it in Lily's hands. It's cold tonight. This one's warm. It was his. He used to say, a good sweater hugs the one you love again, even when you're not there. She buried her nose in the collar and giggled. It smells like the forest. Samantha bit her lip. Michael turned away, his shoulders loosening. Marcus cleared his throat, a comma in the middle of emotion. Good. They'll head down to town, and we'll meet tomorrow, step by step, Ellie. James nodded. I'll drive them to the main road. Ice is thick. At the doorway, Samantha turned back. I'm sorry, I'll be different. Not with gifts, by showing up when you need me. No one can show up on time for the past, I said. Only for the present. I looked at Michael. That goes for you, too. He nodded, no protest. They left. James's flashlight drew a steady beam through the snow, guiding them down the slope. Marcus lingered, resting a hand on my shoulder. Tomorrow will feel lighter. Is that your lawyer's opinion? I asked. No. A friend's? Only Lily and I remained. She opened her box, an old photo album. David and I, 1989. I was laughing, his arm around me. She pointed at the pictures. Did you and Grandpa ever fight? Of course, I said, smiling. But we never forgot to look at each other afterward. Like Mommy, and you now. Yes, like that, just taking longer to forgive. I made cocoa. The smell of milk and chocolate mixed with wool and wood. David's sweater swallowed Lily's small frame. She waved her arms and laughed. I'm a snowman wearing Grandpa's coat. Her laughter sounded like chimes in winter wind. Something opened inside me. A space clean and whole, no longer hollow. Sleep crept into her eyes. I tucked her in. Tomorrow, I'll tell you how Grandpa and I met, okay? But don't forget the coffee, she mumbled, eyes closing. Lights out. The fire still glowed. Outside, the porch was blanketed in white, no tire tracks left, a clean page for the morning to come. I sat in the armchair and opened my brown leather journal. Christmas night. Michael has signed. Truth revealed. Control born from fear. Avoidance born from pain. Mother is not the enemy. She's the mirror. Compromise. They're in town, not home. Bridge. Lily asked to stay. I gave her David's sweater. Inheritance isn't money. It's warmth that survives the winter, I added. Tomorrow, no need for victory or defeat, just truth, spoken without humiliation. My phone buzzed. Marcus. 9 a.m., I'll get the coffee. James. Escorted them to Route 12. Ice cleared, sleep now. I smiled. The men left in my life didn't command. They offered protection. A small but priceless difference. I blew out the candle on the windowsill. The soft touch was like a scar finally sealing. Snow fell fine and even outside. I leaned back in the chair and whispered into the dark. David, do you see? I've learned the hardest lesson. To leave the table that had no seat for me, so that one day I could invite them to mine. And in the glow of the Timber Ridge fire, my heart felt light enough to hold tomorrow's breakfast, unbroken, whole. Tomorrow morning, at the cafe in the valley, no gifts, no surprises, just coffee and words, 5 years late, but still in time. This Christmas morning began differently. No scent of fear, no ache of old winters, only the smell of baked bread, pine resin, and that soft golden light seeping through the window, touching my hand where it rested on a cup of coffee. Timber Ridge was silent, as if the whole world were holding its breath so I could begin again. Lily was still asleep on the couch, David's sweater draped over her shoulders. The firelight made her cheeks glow pink. I watched her, serene, unguarded, and realized that life keeps going quietly without needing to be loud about it. Outside, the fog was lifting. The pine branches, still heavy with snow, shimmered like they'd been dusted with crystal. I thought, if David were here, he'd say, "See, every storm scrubs the sky clean." I brewed another pot of tea, inhaling the scent of ginger and cinnamon. In the quiet, bubbling sound, I remembered the other Christmases. Crowded tables with no real warmth, phone calls that felt like duty, and that endless sense of being misplaced inside my own family. Now, I no longer waited for an invitation. I'd learned how to invite myself to the table. A knock on the door, soft but certain. I already knew who it was. No more surprises. I went to the door and opened it. Michael, Samantha, and the 2 grandchildren stood there. No luxury cars, no glittering boxes, just wool sweaters, bare hands, hesitant eyes. Michael forced a small smile. "Merry Christmas, Mom," I replied. "Merry Christmas. This year, you knocked." He let out a breath of a laugh, something almost like gratitude. Samantha held a small basket. "Not to make up for anything," she said quietly. "Just to share." "Good," I said. "Because here, we only share. We don't atone." They stepped inside. Light and cold followed them in. The fireplace burned steadily, the scent of cinnamon wrapping the air. Lily woke, sat up, and cried out, "Grandma, they're here!" She ran into her mother's arms. Samantha bent down, hugging her back, her shoulders trembling. I watched them and felt my heart unclench. It wasn't a perfect reunion, but it was real. And that was enough. We sat around the table, no speeches, no etiquette, just hesitant conversation, fragments of memories being pieced back together. Michael spoke about his new job, cautious but genuine. Samantha mentioned a charity project she'd joined. They talked less than I'd imagined, but they listened more than they used to. And that, for me, was the beginning. Midway through, Marcus stopped by. He brought a bottle of red wine, setting it on the table. "For tradition," he said. "But this time, not to forget, to remember." James arrived too, carrying a bundle of firewood. He smiled. "Timber Ridge is safe now," he said. "Patrol came by. The ice is cleared. The road's open. Everything's steady." "Thank you, James," I said. Not just the road, my heart too. When the sun reached its height, I lifted my cup. Just tea, no wine. I looked around the table, familiar faces, wrinkled, scarred, weary, but trying. And I said, "This year, I wish something different. Not peace, because peace doesn't come by itself. I wish us courage, to ask before we judge. Kindness, to ask permission before stepping into someone's life. And strength, to walk away when we are no longer welcome. Because only when we dare to leave the table that wasn't meant for us can we build one of our own." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Michael nodded. eyes bright with tears. Samantha smiled faintly, a tear slipping down her cheek. Lily clapped her hands, laughing. "Good job, Grandma!" We all laughed, a true laugh, not one rehearsed for appearances. My heartbeat found its rhythm again, slow and certain, like it had been waiting years to remember its own pace. That afternoon, we built a snowman outside. Michael and James worked the body, Samantha shaped the face, and Lily stuck pine branches for arms. I added David's old knit hat on top. Everyone fell quiet for a moment, and Samantha whispered, "He looks like Dad." I nodded. "He'd like this." The breeze softened. Afternoon light slanted across the ridge, making the snow gleam like silver. Marcus poured another cup of tea, murmuring, "Ellie, I think he's still here, in every breath you take." I smiled. "I know, but this time, I don't need him to lead me anymore. I can walk on my own." When dusk came to Timber Ridge, we all gathered again by the fire. The children played cards. I opened my brown leather journal. My hand trembled, not from age, but from the swell of something finally alive again. This year, they knocked. Not to demand, but to ask. Not to control, but to share. I'm no longer the forgotten one. I'm the one who chose how to be remembered. Love isn't possession. It's the space wide enough for someone to come home. I paused, watching the fire reflect in the glass. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, David's voice, gentle as ever. "You did it, Ellie." Night fell. They went back to their inn in town. Only Marcus, James, and I stayed. They helped me clear the table. I poured a little more wine. Marcus lifted his glass. "To new beginnings." I raised mine, my voice low but firm. "To respect, to love that asks before assuming, and to the courage to leave a table that never saved you a seat so you can build your own." The three glasses met, the crystal note ringing like snow breaking underfoot. Later, after they left, I sat alone before the fire. The flames glowed softly now, no longer fierce. In the window's reflection, the snowman still stood, David's hat tilted slightly askew. I smiled. My phone buzzed, a message from Samantha. "Mom, Lily's asleep. Thank you for leaving the door open." I replied, "I didn't open it. I just never closed it." Then I stepped out to the porch. The air was sharp and clean. My breath rose white into the night. I felt light, like a blank page waiting for its next chapter. Closing my eyes, I whispered, "They left me for 5 Christmases, but by walking away, I taught them how to return. And at last, I'm seated at my own table, where no one is forgotten, not even me." Above Timber Ridge, snow kept falling, soft, slow, bright, like a late blessing to myself. "Merry Christmas, Ellie. Welcome home." There are wounds that need no knife for revenge, only a peace so deep that no one can disturb it. Ellie never needed to defeat anyone. She only had to stand up, claim her own boundaries, and that was enough. Sometimes, revenge isn't about making someone hurt the way you once did. It's about being able to smile without needing their apology. Because true forgiveness isn't always for others. Sometimes, it's the final gift you give yourself. And you? If it were you, after being forgotten for 5 Christmases, would you walk away or stay and reclaim your seat at the table? Tell me your story, because perhaps, at some point in our lives, we have all been Ellie, if only for a moment.